And Amanda, you are sharing your profile. Oh, she's gone. Perfect. Never mind. Barry, can you see that? Are we live?
Yes, we are live.
We are live. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lost Suitcases Souls Driven by Wanderlust. I'm your host, Valerie Pennington, and we're here basically every week to talk about something a little bit lighter than the news, as we all, I think, need a little bit of a break. And travel, the people who travel, and great adventurers are always wonderful storytellers. Today is no exception. My guest is Barry Carlton. He is, in his own words, a recovering lawyer, but also an amazing photographer. And he has some expertise in what is, for most of us, a very sort of off the map almost part of the world. And that's what he's going to talk about today. We actually have in San Diego a sister city in Latvia. So Barry, first of all, welcome to Lost Suitcases. I'm so happy you could join me today.
Thank you. Very glad to be here.
This is such a cool story that you have. And of course, it's always lovely to have photographers on because you guys are your master storytellers. So I'm not really sure where to begin. I think when we first met, I was very interested in finding out how you got connected to Latvia in the first place, a place, at least for most Westerners, it's just kind of not on our radar. So can you start us off with that?
Well, it's a story that kind of goes back a long ways. As you mentioned, I'm a recovering lawyer, and I've been photographing since just after law school. And luckily, it wasn't the other way around because I probably wouldn't have become a lawyer to begin with. But I did a lot of photography for San Diego Lawyer magazine, which is put out by the County Bar Association. And the editor of that magazine was a guy named Martin Kruming. And Martin Kruming is a very interesting guy. And one of the things that he has taken as one of his projects is to connect San Diego with the world. So it started with Azerbaijan. His neighborhood east of San Diego, which is now called Switzer Highlands, due to a contest that he ran, is now actually a sister neighborhood officially with in a district in Baku, Azerbaijan. So his neighborhood has about 80 families in it. The district in Azerbaijan has about 120,000 people. And I was there photographing when the San Diego City Council declared the sister city, or sister neighborhood, not sister city, but sister neighborhood relationship. Martin since expanded that. He created a group called Global Neighborhood Partners, and he is expanding that to various other parts of the world, including Mongolia and Azerbaijan, I mentioned, and Latvia. And the way the Latvia thing came about was he and his wife, Barbara, traveled to Latvia, to Riga, the capital, one year, walked into the city hall, said, "You don't know me, but my name's Martin Kruming, and I'd like to connect my neighborhood to a neighborhood in Riga." And being Latvians, as you find out, they didn't throw him out. They said, okay. And they hooked him up with the director of District 3 in Riga. And everything followed after that. They started having exchanges. The Latvians sent a photographer to San Diego. He spent a week here in San Diego taking a portrait of the city. We sent a chef to Latvia who spent a week cooking Mexican food for the Latvians.
I wonder what they thought of that.
Well, that's very interesting. You would have thought it was completely unknown to them, but when I was there, as mentioned in the intro, they actually do have a Tex-Mex restaurant right there in Riga, which I didn't try, but it's there. So anyway, I then got sent to Riga to do my own portrait of the city, where I met up with the photographer that they sent here, and met up with a number of other people, as you will be hearing.
I love these kind of exchanges. And I think especially, right now, it's so important for us to, learn to appreciate, other places, other people, other cultures. And so for me, these kind of global partnerships, neighborhood cities are so incredibly important. And so I love the idea. And I can't wait for you to show some of these photos. I think that can we go there? Is it too soon? I'm
Well, we
ready.
can definitely go there.
Okay.
I guess the thing that's interesting, maybe to follow up a little bit on your earlier question,
Okay.
uh,
Sorry.
I grew up in the 60s and 70s. The Soviet Union was in full swing. As far as I could tell, everything was gray there. Everyone lived, under this horrible communist system, and it was a monolith. And it never occurred to me that I would ever go there, ever go to any part of it. And I really wasn't clear. I'd heard of the Baltics, but I wasn't really clear even where they were. And I'd been to Europe a few times, but the Baltics were just not on my radar. So it was really through Martin that I ended up going there. And I've now been back once, past the first time. And I certainly hope to go back again. There are the three countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, are fascinating places. I've yet to get to Lithuania, but the Estonia and Latvia are there. And it's a corner of the world that I think is well worth exploring. It's very colorful. So let me show you. I'll give you an example of color.
I have to say, I shared the same experience in terms of upbringing, and it was so many places of the world actually were presented that way to me. I remember like Cambodia. The only thing I learned in Cambodia, was the Khmer Rouge. And as far as my history was concerned, that's all there was. And so when I actually had the ability to go to Cambodia, I was blown away. There's obviously so much more. And, I think this idea of this very gray, monolithic, Soviet, I think that was shared by a lot of people, myself included. So yeah, it's a really great experience to be able to actually go to a place at that time, you never thought you would ever see, right?
Right. And had no concept of what it could possibly be like.
Right.
And actually, I mentioned that I went twice. The second time, I've got a number of pictures of this and also a video, was something that I have never heard of happening anyplace other than Latvia. One of the big things with the Latvians is they are very big on massive choral and dance performances. And every 5 years, they have a national song and dance festival. And in 2018, It was not only their 5-year festival, it was the centennial of their independence, which they date back to the very end of World War I. We got to see that with performances of 20,000 chorus members, 17,000 dancers all at once.
That's
fascinating
incredible
stuff. But anyway, let me show you.
Incredible.
This is what we're talking about. This is the capital city.
Beautiful.
This is the presidential palace in Riga, taken from across the Daugava River. The presidential palace is the building in the middle with the white tower, and the Latvian flag is the one with the red and white, the white stripe on the red field. And I believe this is the presidential flag, indicating the president is in residence. And that's what the city looks like. There's, let me see if I can get to my, okay, it is not wanting, how do I undo this? I'm trying to get to the next image here. Let me see here. If I can,
No worries.
I can zoom in. Let me go this way. There we go. That's better. And here we have
we lost
from
your
the other
screen
direction.
share, though. Barry, we lost your.
I lost my screen share. Okay, let me get back to screen share. Actually, let me get back to Zoom and share screen. There we go. Okay.
There we go. Okay, we got it. Oh, I love this. This is so beautiful. I'm sorry. This looks like some sort of toy model city.
Yeah,
like at
it's
Legoland or something.
Legoland, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
And it's, and it's like, I'm looking around and I don't see a lot of gray.
Yeah, no, I don't see any gray, really.
It's a really bright, colorful place.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and this is an interesting thing too, because this is the old town, obviously. It's not all that big, but it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. It was established, I think, around close to 1,000 years ago, actually. And some of these buildings date back almost that far. But what's kind of interesting is if you look over here on the left, and I've got another picture of it later on, that is an ad for Aeroflot, and basically advertising trips from Moscow to New York. And it's sort of fascinating because here Latvia is right at the very edge of Russia, and very, very aware that Russia is right there, right beside it. Yeah. Latvia is about 4 times the size of San Diego County, with about half of San Diego County's population. So
okay,
right next to Russia is a big, big influence in it.
Wow.
Let me see if I have to go back off of screen sharing again. Okay, and let me get back. This is the, let me get
We've
back. We've
lost your screen share again?
Yes.
Oh no.
There we go. Here we go. This is a little awkward. Anyway, this is sort of the most famous building in Riga. If you Google Riga, you will get to, this is the House of the Blackheads, which was a guild of some sort from medieval times. That sadly was reduced to rubble in World War II. It's a reconstruction, but it's definitely a prime example of Latvian architecture. And of course, in the background here, you see a Soviet era broadcast tower. Just the strange mixture of things.
Yeah, no kidding.
Okay, so let's see. Let's see if I can figure out some way to do better here.
Yeah, is there a way? Do you have like
yes, here.
Arrow?
I think this
there you
better.
go.
There we go.
Yeah,
yeah. I was doing an arrow, but it wasn't doing it.
Okay, no, that works.
So anyway, yeah, the same thing at night.
Wow.
Another thing, this is the Latvian State Opera. And my wife volunteers for the San Diego Opera Company. Latvian State Opera, in a country, again, with less than the population of San Diego County, has an opera with a full-time staff of 200 members. They put on between 9 and 12 operas every year in this wonderful, huge opera house that seats, I don't know, 1,000 people or something. It's big. And we had a long discussion with them about the idea of volunteerism, because San Diego Opera is largely depends on volunteers. They have a large staff of volunteers, and they hire people as they need for their performances, which I think they do, on the order of 3 major operas and a few minor operas every year. And they were astounded that that Americans would volunteer. That was such a surprise to them.
Really?
Well, how do you hire them? Well, what if they don't work out? What if there's liability?
How do you fire a volunteer?
How do you fire a volunteer? They were very concerned about that. Yeah.
Interesting.
So
this also jumps out to me as like a natural exchange for the future. Wouldn't that be awesome?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Young Artist Program.
Yeah.
San Diego Opera has one. And, Latvia is an extremely musical country. It's just and this kind of goes into the history. When you go into this building, it's Latvia has this interesting history, which we'll get to here. But let me go here. This was one of our guides. When we went to Latvia, we were guests of the Latvian city government, the Riga city government, which provided us with 2 guides. This man, Janis, was a city architect, and interestingly grew up under communism. Spent a lot of time out in the countryside, listening to Radio Free Europe or Voice of America. Had a illegal copy of George Orwell's 1984, which he read in one night and then quickly passed on so he wouldn't get arrested. A very
Wow.
interesting guy. Uh,
Wow.
this
By the way,
was our
that
other
was,
guy.
oh, wow. These are beautiful portraits, by the way.
Well, thank you.
It was just amazing. That's a beautiful shot.
Well, and uh, Yanis was 33 when the Soviet Union fell, when independence came back. This is Dasa, and she was 19 when the wall fell. And she grew up being very happy under communism. She believed she lived in the best country in the world, in the best possible situation, and everything was really nice. And she remembers her childhood as being very happy. Yet, interestingly, right toward the end, as the Soviet Union opened up, she was allowed to go to London and work as an au pair for a year. And she told us the story that the first night she was there, the first day she was there, they took her to a clothing store. And the first night she went back and she lay down to go to sleep. And every time she closed her eyes, all she could see was the row upon row upon row of clothes in the store.
Wow.
She'd never seen anything like that in her life.
Yeah.
And she began to
Wow.
figure that maybe there's something a little odd about the system she'd come from. Except at the same time, she thought it was very strange that the Londoners had to pay for water, because water's free, right?
Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah.
Wow. So Latvia, really quick, Latvia regained, I'm thinking like 90, 91. Am I close when they regained
91, actually. It was January of 91.
Okay.
And in fact, we have sort of this, I have a sort of a little short history. We've got a Latvian stave church that dates from hundreds of years ago in their ethnographic park. We have Latvia around the turn of the 20th century, where they actually had their own indigenous automobile industry. This is actually a Latvian car. It's in their Automotive Museum. I think it achieves a top speed of about 15 miles an hour.
No kidding. That is gorgeous. That goes faster than I would have expected.
Video of the thing. There's a video of it running in a parade. Latvia around the early 20th century was very prosperous. Turns out that in Latvia has one of the largest collections of Art Nouveau architecture in the world. They had their own indigenous Art Nouveau architects, actually. It was just all the rage. This being the inside of their opera house, which you saw earlier. This being a little more Art Nouveau, just a building on the street. This being an interior of one of the Art Nouveau museums. This is pretty much the way the Latvians lived at that time, at least the ones with enough money. This being a house where Philippe Halsman, the photographer, lived at one point. You notice like cats on the eaves there.
Wow.
And then this happened. We were taken out to a national park, which is a bog, great expansive bog. This is on the edge of it, so this isn't the boggy part. And they pointed out to us this depression. And in fact, this depression ran all through the trees. We had initially sort of ignored it, assuming, I guess, that it was a stream, but it's not. It's remains of a World War I trench. This was a battlefield for years, apparently. And this is the Latvian photographer who came to San Diego, and explaining that this was a trench, he pointed out, and he spoke very few words of English, but he pointed out, this is a trench. He said, you need soldier, and he threw himself down in the trench and took aim with his camera so I could get his picture being a soldier.
Wow.
So anyway, so you've got this period. Russia actually ruled Latvia from about 1710 to right after World War I. In World War I, the Germans wore down the Russians so substantially, and then the Russians had their own Soviet revolution, the Bolshevik revolution, that the Latvians took the advantage of the time and declared independence. So starting in 1918, they had to fight a war of independence with Russia, or by that time the Soviet Union, for 2 years. They then became independent. That lasted till about 1940, when the Nazis invaded.
Mhm.
And the Nazi invasion was, as it was everywhere else, a particularly ugly thing. This is the somewhat restored remains of the Grand Choral Synagogue in Riga, which is one of the finest and grandest synagogues. Riga had a very large Jewish population, but the Nazis, shortly after they invaded, herded a whole bunch of people into this synagogue and burned it to the ground. This is sort of, and they then bulldozed over the whole site. This is a somewhat restored version of that site. The Nazi occupation was horrible. This is a Holocaust museum exhibit. These are lists of people who were transported, Jews who were sent off to labor camps, off to death camps. It just goes on and on. And these were all related to this area. It was just a horrifying thing. This is in the downtown, the old town of Riga. And the reason I have this picture is you'll see these lines in the pavement. Those are the outlines of buildings that no longer exist. These were buildings that were destroyed by bombs in World War II. And when the Soviets came into power, when the Soviets retook the country, they were not terribly interested in rebuilding the downtown. So what happened was the buildings simply got marked with these outlines. And then World War II ended with the Soviets coming back in and taking control, which, as far as the Latvians were concerned, meant that the German occupation became the Soviet occupation. That's a problem, though, because about a third of the Latvian population is ethnic Russian, which they were brought in during the Stalin era and later to sort of make sure that everyone is properly Russian. So the Russians on May 9th every year celebrate the liberating of their part of the country. And this is the Russian War Monument. We happen to be there right afterwards. And this is what happens. People come and lay flowers all over the monument. So you've got a third of the population laying flowers and 2/3 of the population thinking that this is this is the memorial to the next phase of the occupation. So it's it's an interesting problem that the country has.
That is. And so are there a lot of issues, between different, within Latvia? Is there a lot of, I'm not asking this correctly, but is there a lot of strife between these different ethnic groups, or have they figured out a way to just acknowledge and work together, or what do you think?
They seem to have figured out a way to get along. We asked our host about that, and there's a lot of mixing that goes along. I think the issue from the Latvian point of view is they are worried that Russia, their neighbor, might have designs on taking over Latvia again, just as they invaded or pretended not to invade Ukraine.
Right.
And that's a big issue. We did not get the impression that the Russian minority felt oppressed, or that there was any overt hostility between the groups. And certainly, there's no indication that celebrations like this were at all frowned upon.
That's pretty amazing, because the scale of this is pretty incredible.
Yes,
I'm really surprised to see that. What about language, though? So do the people of Russian descent, do they identify like as Russian? Do they speak Russian, or does everyone speak Latvian? Or
when the country regained its independence, a large proportion of the Russian population left. The Latvian population, or in Latvia, the population at one point was close to 50% Russian. And after independence, enough left to where now it's roughly 29%. So that was a
Okay.
large chunk. Of the people who remained, they were given the option of becoming Latvian citizens, and I don't know what proportion did, but certainly a large proportion did do that. In terms of language, I am told that walking down the street, you will hear Russian quite a bit. In fact, one of our guides kept asking me if I could tell which was Russian and which was Latvian. And to my ear, they sounded pretty much the same. But I'm assured that there was a lot of Russian being spoken.
Okay.
So, and you know, this was World War II is very present for that Russian population.
Oh yeah, I bet.
So, and what, you know, so that issue, that whole Russian reoccupation,
Wow.
basically ushered in the gray era. And
I was just going to say, there's your gray. This is what was in my book. Yeah.
Yeah, there's gray. It's a Russian era apartment building. This is out in the countryside. You see these buildings all over the place, this strange sort of white block. You've got buildings, this is more in the city center. And one thing that you have that's an interesting problem, a lot of these buildings are very run down. And the problem is that nobody is quite clear who owns them. They were, of course, everything was owned by the state until the Soviets moved out. And then, okay, well, all right, you're all capitalists now. Well, okay, so who owns these buildings? Do the tenants?
Who takes care of them? Oh,
yeah,
my goodness.
Who's in charge? And it turns out that a lot of buildings, basically what they need is a good condo owners association, and none of them have it. So you've got a lot of just ad hoc things, people just fixing up their own apartments, people running wires to their own apartments. You see big clusters of wires going into these buildings.
Well, so do you know, are these apartments now owned by the tenants, or can they like buy them, or because you think that
my understanding is that it's kind of a mix.
Okay.
Yeah, what happened was
what a confusing situation.
Yeah, what happened was that the people who lived there retained their right to stay there. And then, so as those people moved out, then other people were able to actually buy. So you've got this funny mix of people who are kind of tenants forever, I guess, until they die, and other people who want to come in and refurbish things. On our second trip, we actually went into one of these buildings that had been refurbished, and it was, albeit small inside, the apartments were quite small, but they were beautifully done with marble countertops, all the things that we like here in the West. But that's just a matter of, by this time, somebody had come along with actually the money to work on something.
Interesting.
So, another thing that was sort of curious, this was something that was not really discovered until the Soviet Union fell, but this was Leonid Brezhnev's Rolls Royce, and which he, as far as anyone can tell, he personally crashed. They found it in a warehouse after the Soviets left, and there was no indication that any chauffeur of his had ever been sent off to prison. And it was certainly known that he loved cars, loved driving, and loved drinking. So it's quite possible he combined all of that and ran into something immovable at one point.
So this is in obviously a museum.
Yes, their auto museum. They have an excellent automotive museum. In fact, here's another car in the automotive museum, which struck me as interesting in a couple ways. One, it's a Woody. So, right. Yeah, early 1950s, the American influence, even in the Soviet era. But at the same time, we were told that this was a car that would attract a lot of suspicion if you tried to buy one, because people who bought them might be susceptible to a crime called speculation. And what speculation is what we would call free enterprise. go out,
Okay.
start a business, sell something. Well, that was speculation, and that was against the law. And of
Wow.
course, what better way to speculate than to drive around with your merchandise in a nice
Sure.
Woody? So,
Plenty of room for all of your goods there.
so you had to be very careful getting a car like this.
Wow.
You had to definitely keep your nose clean.
Wow.
I mean, one of the things that fascinated me about Latvia, generally about going there, like we started mentioning at the outset, was again the whole communist history. I'd never been able to see it up close. So one of our guides, the architect, had actually created a museum that had apartments from various times in Latvian history. The one that fascinated us was the Soviet era apartment. This would be from the 60s to the 80s, roughly what the furnishings would look like. This was the one-channel radio, we were told. That it was for the state to make announcements, and it just had a volume dial on it, and otherwise it was just there. So apparently pretty much every house had one, and there it is. This was their kitchen. We notice here in this kitchen, there's the sink. It's got one faucet. So presumably it did not have hot and cold running water. It did have running water. I believe this was a washing machine because you got your iron on top of it, your stove. Before the graphic designers got into the vodka label business, you had Stolichnaya, which looks a little different today.
Oh, yes. Look at that.
Yeah. And yet this kind of interested me too. This was a collection of children's toys. In here, right up here, there's actually a Russian version of Chutes and Ladders. Oops.
My gosh.
Okay, let me go back. Let me find it. There we go. Chutes and Ladders. You've got a xylophone. You've got dominoes. You got this sudden insight. And I'm standing there. I'm going, Soviet kids played with dolls too.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, some child loved this doll at some point, or these dolls.
Why is it that images like this, the images that we can all relate to, what does it look like inside, your home where you live, tells the most amazing stories that, nothing in a museum, a monument, you never get that. But I think we're all just at a core level interested in, how did people live during that time? And these are great.
Yeah, and I think too that what we forget is we tend to abstract other people.
Yes.
They are, name the group. That's what they are.
Yes.
And when you realize on an individual level that they are very much like we are, that I don't have to speak Latvian to understand that this is a doll and this is something a child would play with.
And I think also we categorize based on government policies, and we forget, because of the media and what we tend to really prioritize, it's about the people. The people are not necessarily represented by whatever the government stance is. We all
exactly
at some level, want the same things, and you want the same things for our children and our families. And this really brings that home. That's beautiful.
You know what I think I should do at this point? I think I should jump ahead to the really unusual thing, which was our second
That would be
trip
great.
Yes. This again is the every 5 years festival. This was the first concert we saw on the trip there. This is 4 symphony orchestras gathered together with a chorus to match.
Wow.
It was, that's pretty big.
That is huge.
The next night, we went to a dance concert. This is a track and field stadium, and there are ultimately, well, let me back up. They basically dance the history of Latvia in this show. And so they've got the whole Latvian family tree, all the original tribes and whatnot, the whole history. And you end up with a total of about 18,000 dancers. doing this performance. This concert goes on for about 2.5 hours, and it's dance troupes from all over the country, hundreds of dance troupes, and yet they don't individually perform. They perform as a unit. So that's all choreographed with hundreds of people at any given time.
I can't imagine how long this would take to prepare, how the different groups are individually, choreographed so that they can come together. I'm a dancer. This I can't even imagine making this happen.
we asked our guide, and she said, well, that's just kind of what Latvians do.
Okay.
So, okay,
Latvians
then.
are pretty amazing if they can just do this.
So
that's epic. That's got to be some sort of record, for the greatest number of performers doing something like choreographed at that scale. Oh,
and it gets even bigger.
It's bigger.
And bigger.
Oh, my goodness.
And bigger. Until finally, there's the whole stadium at the grand finale with all 18,000 dancers out on the field.
That's insane. That is insane.
So then,
as a photographer, what a nightmare. You're like, okay, so how many did you stitch those together for this panorama?
That's stitched together. That is actually 6 pictures stitched together.
Okay, it has to be. There's just no way.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so then, if that wasn't good enough, the next night, there's a choral concert. This is sort of a close-up. This is actually a tight-in close-up of just a few of the people. This is the panorama of everyone. And, okay, this concert started about 8 or so at night. By 2:30 in the morning, it was still going. And let me get to the, okay, let me get back to, I have a short video clip here.
Okay.
At 2:30 in the morning, they came to sort of the grand finale. And after which, mind you, the concert wasn't over. The sing-along began after that. It went till dawn. We left before that, but we were all feeling pretty good. And this was what was happening.
Oh my God.
This is about 15,000 singers. You can see some dancers. I don't know how the quality is, but dancers in the front, musicians, instrumentalists, who all add up to about 20,000 performers. So, and that's going to the right edge. Those are all choir members there by the flags.
God.
And one of the things that was interesting about the concert was that if a song was particularly popular, they would repeat it. So this is a repeat of what they just sang.
I see. More
all
is
the
more.
people in the audience have their cell phones with their cell phone flashlights on and are waving the cell phones at the performers, who in many cases are waving cell phones back.
You said every 5 years they put on shows like this.
Yes.
This is, I mean, who would have thought Latvia it may win awards for like their party, I would have never imagined this scale
Yes,
of it.
and when you consider this is about, the performers alone are about 1% of the whole population.
Great. That's fabulous.
Yeah. It's just, we're
Wow.
just about to come to the grand finale. But
that is insane.
and you can see the dancers. I don't know if you can see it across the Zoom, but the singers are all swaying as well.
Wow. That is insane. That is absolutely insane.
Yeah, you just try to imagine somebody.
I don't think any of us. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you just try to imagine something like that happening in, say, San Diego County, which has more people than Latvia.
Well, I got to say, we can't hold a candle to their social partying abilities there. I don't think anyone watching this right now would have ever, if you say Latvia, like that is definitely not what they would have thought of for sure. And as we close, I know you said this was very nice. I thought you had told me that some of your friends and exchange folks in Latvia are going to be watching the show, not live because it's like 5 a.m. there, but do you want to shout out to anybody in particular?
I do. Say hello to Dasa and Giannis, our two guides, and Eurus, I hope, who's the photographer, I hope is watching. And I guess the whole Foreign Affairs Office of the city of Riga. Want to give a shout out that Riga's a great place, and nobody could have treated us better than the Latvians, and I hope to see them again.
Well, I am hoping that everyone who is watching this has a new appreciation and excitement about learning more. And I do want to mention we're going to have links for Barry's work. He actually has a book with his wife, Impressions of Riga, Latvia Through the Lens of a San Diegan. And that book is available for sale, yes?
It is.
It is.
Unfortunately,
Okay, so
it's through Blurb, which means
okay.
that translates into expensive. But so I set it up for actual sale. I got the price down just below $100, which means I make $2 on every book.
You're kidding.
No.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's the hazard of self-publishing.
Okay.
But it's a nice book.
We're gonna have
this is
info
it.
in your. Oh, it's beautiful. We're gonna have info down below as well. And Barry, thank you so much. These were amazing stories and amazing photographs, and truly an amazing place. And that was just a joy to listen to. It's definitely not the country that we saw in our textbooks of just gray monolithic Soviet occupied. Yeah, you definitely whet my appetite. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely worth more than a visit.
It looks amazing. So thank you so much. And I want to let the viewers know that next week we have another amazing guest to tell more amazing stories. Dave Brady is going to be here to talk about his incredible adventure hiking to Mount Everest Base Camp. And I know that is a bucket list item for a lot of folks. And he did it. His story is incredibly inspiring. He did it. He had wanted to go for so long and had all kinds of, he went through a hip replacement. That didn't stop him. I find his story incredibly inspiring. And so if you're up for stories of adventure, you definitely want to check back next week. Lost Suitcases will be here live Saturday at 6 p.m. And thank you all for watching. And everyone stay safe. Keep your suitcases in storage. Come back here for your travel fix. We'll see you next week. Thanks so much, Barry. Bye-bye.
Thank you.